So I'm going to talk a little bit about a recent experience that I've had. This is sort of my experience, so hopefully some of you can relate to this. Some of you can gain some insights. If you're thinking of going to a startup, perhaps you'll get something out of this. And if you're not, maybe you'll be inspired to. So as you can see, at the top left there, that's where I used to work. A nice cushy building, and now that's where I work down below there, that log cabin. Well, maybe not that bad. But one of the things that really struck home for me right away, pretty quickly actually, is how insulated in big pharma we are from a lot of the forces of the marketplace. Like we're doing lots of cool stuff and tough stuff, but really we're quite insulated by the big organization, and that's quite different in a startup. So here's a question, very simple. Do you work for a startup company, yes or no? No, okay. So about a third of you do, that's great. So really earnings are everything in a startup company. Obviously they're important in big pharma, but when you're in a startup, that's all you think about and talk about every day. The P&L is critical. You're constantly tracking what's going in, what's going out every day, because it matters, because there's not a lot of cushion. Also, if you're a publicly traded company, which ours is, every quarter it's crazy. For 2 or 3, 4 weeks, you're doing nothing but preparing the filing for that quarter. So, and that's kind of a fun challenge. It was new for me, but I kind of enjoyed it. It's pretty cool. And then finally, in a startup where you don't have a lot of resources, even though the P&L is your guidepost, most of the time you don't know where you're at. You don't have good reporting, so you're kind of flying blind. So a learning for me is you have to be really good at ambiguity and dealing with that uncertainty. And over time, hopefully you'd get some better reporting. Focus was critical, so right away in our organization, we spent time really zeroing in on where we wanted to perform and where we wanted to invest, what products. We were all over the place, so we zeroed in on key products. Also, in terms of your people, they need to know there's always going to be change in a startup. And finally, there's very little process. So if you're used to process supporting what you do in big pharma, when you get to a startup, there really isn't any. You've got to develop that, which can be challenging but very important. This is probably my favorite slide. There's always something lurking around the corner that you're not aware of. One of my favorite, one of the most memorable moments about 12 months ago is the QA guy called me up and said, Jim, we have a temperature excursion. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? Like, what does he mean? And so after I pretended for about 5 minutes I knew what he was talking about, I actually fessed up and said, well, what's going on? And so we dealt with that. Audits are always happening from the Canadian government or from notified bodies, making sure you're doing things properly. Aged AR, basically, you got to make sure you're getting paid for your products, and that can be an issue in a startup. I've spent days in courtrooms with lawyers defending our patents. That was new and interesting. We've had supply issues, visiting CMOs, finding out why they can't produce our products, and that obviously is a big issue. And then hidden fees that were being charged that maybe we weren't aware of that we had to get a hold of. So, every day or every week there was always something, which, the lesson for me was you had to be prepared, you had to be agile, but it was pretty fun. You're also dealing with different, at least I was dealing with different groups. So for the first time, we really had to deal with a board of directors and present to them and make sure they were confident with what we were doing. Venture capitalists, are always eager to know how things are going. They're getting a good return for their investment. A lot of partners. So in our company, we have multiple partners that we deal with, contracts. So for me, I learned the intricacies of a contract and where to look and what the most important parts are and how to renegotiate bad terms. And then CMOs, as I've already mentioned, contract manufacturers. So, if you're going to go to a startup, you're going to have to be prepared to deal with these kinds of stakeholders. They're really important. But again, kind of fun, kind of a good adventure. Also, deal making is critical. In a startup, you're constantly looking at what's around the corner, what kind of deals you can make, either new deals or, like I said, renegotiating old deals. If you have CMOs, you got to work with them to get the best possible cost out of them and the best possible performance. So A lot of deal making. Again, that was new for me. I didn't do a lot of that at Big Pharma, but now it's an everyday thing, and it's a lot of fun. It's challenging but fun, and a critical part of, I believe, what a startup needs to be doing. This one is kind of, I guess, tongue-in-cheek, but fairly early on in my tenure at the company I'm at now, I started signing all the checks, literally. I had to sign every check that went out of the place, and it was revealing. Like, I would recommend it to anybody that's thinking of going to a startup, because you get a detailed and very transparent view of where all the money is going and where it's being spent. Not that you want to stop that or you want to challenge it necessarily, but it just is very educational to help you understand how you're leveraging your resources. But still, you got to stay big pick, right? So everything I've just talked about is a lot of it's minutia. You know, you got to get involved when there's not a lot of people in your company and everybody's got to roll up their sleeves, including the general manager. You got to get involved, know what's going on, but you got to still lead. You got to stay big pick. So it's a bit of a challenging sort of dichotomy that exists. That again, for me as a leader, I found that was a great growth opportunity, but also kind of fun. And finally, speaking of fun, if you're thinking about going to a startup or you are going to one, be prepared to have a lot of fun. It is like I was at Big Pharma for 27 years. I've been here for 2, and I've never had more fun. Maybe that's to do with my age. I don't know. It is a risky venture. I wouldn't have done this when I was 35 with kids that needed to be fed and put through school. But for me now at this stage of my career, and everybody's different, I know, and you all have your own situations, but it's a perfect time to do this. Having a ball, never had more fun. And that line there, a 50% chance you'll be here in 6 months. The first meeting I had with the first person at the company I'm at now, said to me, "Jim, we're happy to have you here, but I'm telling you right now, there's a 50% chance you won't be here in 6 months." Wow, okay, gee, thanks for that welcome. But you know, I know now what he meant, and it's true. I would say the same thing to somebody else coming from Big Pharma. It's very, very different, and sometimes it's hard to adjust. And so if you are, thinking of going, and taking that challenge on, it will push you, it'll challenge you, and there's a 50% chance you'll be there in 6 months. I've been there 1.5 years, so I made it. But that was interesting. So finally, now that I've told you all about what it's like to be at a startup, from my perspective and the lessons that I've learned, let's see if more than 1/3 of you are wanting to go to a startup. 75% say yes. Well, if you have that opportunity, if you want to talk to me about it, feel free to reach out. I'd love to share my insights and support you any way that I can.